Alright, what's up you guys, and welcome back to the 97 English course. In this wonderful recording today, we are going to be talking about Unit 8, Art and Literature. Okay, so let me scroll down here. Unit 8, Art and Literature. Okay, and I'm actually a really big fan of literature. I like reading about fiction and non-fiction, things of that nature, and we're going to be talking a lot about it in this recording right here. So, as always, let's hit the key vocabulary and then move on to listening. Architect, architecture, author, biographer, biography, fiction, introduction, lecture, lecturer, nonfiction, novel, novelist, painter, painting, play, poem, poet, theater, writer. Right? Now let's move on to speaking here, or actually listening, not speaking. Let me turn this to 2 pages. Alright, and here we have the listening section. Okay, so here you can see, actually, let me ask you guys this. What can you see? I know I usually start off by saying what's usually in the pictures, but just take a second and guess. I'm pretty sure most of you already know what this is right here, but do you guys know the rest? These are different kinds of arts and novels and things that are just so valuable and so old at the same time, okay? So let's actually go to exercise A. Look at the items above, which items are art and which items are literature, okay? So we can clearly differentiate between what's art and what's literature. So let me actually start the listening here. I have an audio for you guys, okay? And we're gonna listen and we're gonna understand what's the difference between an art and literature.
126. Unit 8. Art and Literature. Lesson 1. Listening. Exercise B. Listen and point.
Painting, architecture,
Novel, play,
poem, biography. Do you like the plays of William Shakespeare? Have you read the new biography of Charles Dickens?
I love this poem. It's by Thomas Hood.
I'm very interested in architecture.
What a lovely painting. Who is the painter? Who wrote this novel?
Alright, so I'm not gonna pinpoint them exactly right now, and you guys will understand why in a second, but just a quick pinpoint. Here we have the poem, here we have for example, art, and here we have a Shakespeare play, here we have a novel, here we have art as well. You guys get the idea. Now let me actually skip this right here and go to exercise C, read skills check 1, and this is where actually the fun begins, you guys. So here we have lecturers usually begin with an introduction, okay? So the introduction gives you a general idea of the content, okay? So you gotta listen carefully to the introduction and have that thinking process in your head of what is the lecture about, okay? So what is the professor going to say? I gotta have these thoughts going through my head before the lecture actually starts. And what words am I going to hear, whether they're going to be new, how are they related with the topic, okay? So an introduction can give you a lot of details of what's about to go down in the next couple minutes, okay? So let's give it a listen right here.
127. Exercise C. Listen to the introduction to a lecture.
All right, is everybody ready? Let's start. In today's lecture, we're going to look at art. The word art can have different meanings, but today we are only going to look at paintings. We're going to look at different kinds of paintings. Some of the paintings are modern, and some of the paintings are hundreds of years old.
Okay, so now I hope you're able to kind of grasp what I'm trying to tell you in terms of ask yourself after the introduction these questions. So what is the lecture about? And from what I just heard, I know for a fact that the lecture is about art, and specifically paintings, okay? And we know that we have old paintings and modern paintings. So what words am I going to hear exactly? I'll probably hear a lot of art, paintings, the word modern, hundreds, years, a lot of words, okay? And that is how it's supposed to be done. So let me actually play it one more time for you guys, but this time, instead of just try your best to focus on the introduction, grasp as much information as possible, and think about these two questions after we're done.
120. Listen to the introduction to a lecture.
All right, is everybody ready? Let's start. In today's lecture, we're going to look at art. The word art can have different meanings, but today we are only going to look at paintings. We're going to look at different kinds of paintings. Some of the paintings are modern, and some of the paintings are hundreds of years old.
Okay, simple enough. Now, let me actually go back here. I hope you kind of get just kind of a brief idea. And now, you guys remember, he wanted us to differentiate art and literature. So here we have B here, or actually A, I'm sorry. A is literature, okay? So what is literature exactly? It goes into many different sections. So we have fiction and non-fiction, and we'll get to that later on in this lesson right here. What is fiction, what is not? But for now, I don't want to dive into too deep just yet, okay? So literature is basically a story or something that's basically written, okay? And art is obviously a picture, a painting, okay? So number A, or not number A will be is the book or novel Oliver Twist. So that one is obviously literature. And then B, this is obviously a painting, so B will be art. C will be art as well. This is also a different kind of painting. Then we have D. D is a poem, so that will be literature, or just literature. And then we have, you guys know the infamous Sunflowers of Vincent van Gogh. So E will be obviously art, okay? Then we have F, okay? Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. You guys know this. This is so popular. Okay, so that will also be, or this will also be art. Then we have G, also a sort of painting, so art as well. And then we have H. This looks like a novel. I can't really read this or see it, so H will be literature. Then we have I. I is obviously a play, a Shakespeare play, like the gentleman said, so literature. Then we have J. I'm guessing this is a biography, so literature as well. And finally we have K, and this also looks like a painting, so art, okay? Right, now that I got that out of the way, let's listen to exercise D here. Give it a second. Listen to the main part of the lecture and number the paintings in the order you hear about them. Okay, so we're gonna have kind of a main part of a small lecture, right? And we're gonna hear about these things, and we're gonna number them, okay? So I'll just let it play the first time, and I'll play the second time, but that time I'll be solving it with you guys. Here we go.
128. Exercise D. Listen to the main part of the lecture. Number the paintings.
Okay, we are going to look at 5 main kinds of painting in Western culture. That's important. We are only talking about Western culture. Now, firstly, there are portraits. A portrait is a painting of a person. You can usually see just the head and shoulders, but sometimes you can see the whole person. The person is usually looking out of the painting at you. Many portraits show famous people, but the most famous portrait of all shows the face of an unknown woman. You know the name already. It is called the Mona Lisa. It is by the Italian painter Leonardo da Vinci. The second kind of painting is the landscape. A landscape shows a piece of land. Perhaps it is a mountain, or a river, or trees, or a field of flowers. Sometimes there are people in a landscape painting, but they are not important. The painter is interested in the land itself. Claude Monet, the French painter, did many landscapes, including corn poppies. The third kind of painting is the seascape. A seascape painting is similar to a landscape, but of course, the important thing is the sea. Sometimes there are boats or ships in the picture, but sometimes we can just see the sea, calm or stormy. The English painter Turner did a lot of seascapes, including the Fighting Temeraire. The fourth kind of painting is called a still life. In a still life painting, we can see some flowers or some fruit. Apples, oranges, pears, grapes. There are some very famous still life paintings, including Sunflowers by the Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. The last kind of painting is called abstract art. What does abstract mean? One definition is not real. Abstract artists are most interested in colours, lines and shapes, for example squares, circles and triangles. They do not usually paint a lot of detail. Picasso is probably the most famous abstract artist in the world. Now let's look at some more examples of paintings by each artist.
Okay, I hope you were able to get, some information or different kinds of paintings and art. Now let's listen to it again, but I'll be solving it as she talks, okay?
100.
Western culture. Okay, we are going to look at 5 main kinds of painting in Western culture. That's important. We are only talking about Western culture. Now, firstly, there are portraits. A portrait is a painting of a person. You can usually see just the head and shoulders, but sometimes you can see the whole person. The person is usually looking out of the painting at you. Many portraits show famous people, but the most famous portrait of all shows the face of an unknown woman. You know the name already. It is called the Mona Lisa. It is by the Italian painter Leonardo da Vinci. The second kind of painting is the landscape. A landscape shows a piece of land. Perhaps it is a mountain, or a river, or trees, or a field of flowers. Sometimes there are people in a landscape painting, but they are not important. The painter is interested in the land itself. Claude Monet, the French painter, did many landscapes, including corn poppies. The third kind of painting is the seascape. A seascape painting is similar to a landscape, but of course, the important thing is the sea. Sometimes there are boats or ships in the picture, but sometimes we can just see the sea, calm or stormy. The English painter Turner did a lot of seascapes, including the Fighting Temeraire. The fourth kind of painting is called a still life. In a still life painting, we can see some flowers or some fruit. Apples, oranges, pears, grapes. There are some very famous still life paintings, including Sunflowers by the Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. The last kind of painting is called abstract art. What does abstract mean? One definition is not real. Abstract artists are most interested in colours, lines and shapes, for example squares, circles and triangles. They do not usually paint a lot of detail. Picasso is probably the most famous abstract artist in the world. Now let's look at some more examples of paintings by each artist.
Okay, that was simple enough. Now let us move on here to exercise E, listen and answer. Okay, so it seems we're going to have another listen in here, and we're going to have different, and we're going to answer it. So let me play it the first time.
129. Exercise E. Listen and answer.
1. How many main kinds of painting does the lecturer talk about? 2. Can you name one of the kinds? 3. What kind of painting is picture 1? 4. What about picture 2? 5. What can you see in a still life painting? 6. What kind of painting has boats or ships? 7. What shapes can you see in the abstract painting? 8. How many portraits are there?
Okay, now let's listen to that one more time, but I'll be pausing it as we go because I'll actually be answering the guy that's talking, okay?
129. Exercise E. Listen and answer.
1. How many main kinds of painting does the lecturer talk about?
She talks about 5 different kinds of paintings.
2. Can you name one of the kinds?
Yes, a landscape or seascape.
3. What kind of painting is picture 1?
Picture 1 is a portrait.
4. What about picture 2?
Picture 2 is a landscape.
5. What can you see in a still life painting?
You can see fruits, flowers, or specific examples, like right here on picture 4.
6. What kind of painting has boats or ships?
A seascape has boats or ships, but is mainly focused on the water, okay?
7. What shapes can you see in the abstract painting?
So in the abstract painting, you can see squares, triangles, circles, also things such as diamonds, trapeziums. You guys get the idea. More shapes, okay?
8. How many portraits are there?
We have 2 portraits, the Mona Lisa and the abstract painting by Picasso. And that's it. Yep, done. Now let's move on here. And here we have different artists, you guys. Okay. So here we have exercise F. Listen to the introduction to a lecture about literature. Okay. And here we have skills check 2. Guessing spelling of new words. So we've all come across, even me myself personally, there are just some words where you don't know the spelling for, or sometimes you just seem to forget, right? Some words are a little bit tougher than others. So you always, or in lectures, there are always going to be new words. No matter how good you are, there are always going to be new words in a lecture. So what you actually want to do is write these words down, okay? Even if just on a separate list, as the lecture goes. And after the lecture is done, go and check how those words are actually spelled, if you had any spelling mistakes, and more importantly, how many meanings they have and what do they exactly mean, okay? So now let's listen to exercise F here.
130. Exercise F. Listen to the introduction to a lecture about literature.
Every culture has its own art and literature. However, I'm not going to talk about art today. I'm going to talk today about literature in Western culture. I'm going to talk about famous authors, writers of literature. And I'm going to mention some famous titles, that is, the names of famous books and poems and plays. Perhaps you're asking, what is literature? Well, some say it is the art of writing. Literature gives us new experiences, ideas, feelings, and meanings. So, firstly, there are novels.
Okay, now let's listen to that one more time, and then I'll solve these questions here.
100. Exercise F. Listen to the introduction to a lecture about literature.
Every culture has its own art and literature. However, I'm not going to talk about art today. I'm going to talk today about literature in Western culture.
Okay, so what is the lecture about? First question here, and I know I had to pause this, but just so things don't leave my mind so quickly. So what is the lecture about? So now we know that the lecturer told us that he wants to talk about kinds of literature. Okay, literature in Western, if you guys remember, Western Western culture. Yep, that's right. So he wanted to talk about kinds of literature in Western culture. Okay?
Talk about famous authors. Writers of literature.
Okay, so what are authors? And obviously we all know authors are simply writers. Okay? So authors are writers. Let's move on.
and I'm going to mention some famous titles. That is, the names of famous books and poems and plays.
Okay, so what are titles? So titles are the names of books and, for example, plays, poems, okay? And I could say etc. So, for example, etc. full stop. Okay? So now let's move on. Or actually, I mean, we're done
Perhaps
already.
you're asking, what is literature? Well, some say it is the art of writing. Literature gives us new experiences, ideas, feelings, and meanings. So, firstly, there are novels.
Okay, I'm sorry for cutting you guys off like that, but you guys remember when I talked about when listening to an introduction, you gotta always ask yourself, so what is the lecture about? What am I gonna hear from this lecturer based on the introduction? Remember, there are a lot of valuable information from the beginning of an or the introduction of a lecture. Okay? Now let's move on to exercise G. Listen to the main part of the lecture, so let me open this up right here, and let's listen.
131. Exercise G. Listen to the main part of the lecture.
Firstly, there are novels. A novel is a story. Novels often tell the story of a person's life, but the story is not true. We call this type of literature fiction. The most famous novelist in English literature is Charles Dickens. He was born in 1812, but people still read his books today. Dickens's family were very poor. Many of his books were about poor people. The title of his most famous novel is Oliver Twist. The second kind of literature is the biography. A biography is also the story of a person's life, but it is the life of a real person. We call this kind of literature non-fiction. There are biographies of every famous person in the world. For example, there are biographies of Princess Diana, Nelson Mandela, and Bill Clinton. Thirdly, literature includes plays. A play is also a story. Actors bring the story to life in a theatre. William Shakespeare is the most famous author of plays in English literature. He was born in 1564, but like Dickens, his works are still popular. His most famous play is Romeo and Juliet. Finally, there are poems. A poem is often about one idea, for example, love or nature. Many poems have words with similar sounds. We call this rhyme. For example, say and play, or write and night. Shakespeare was a very good poet as well as a writer of plays. Right, let's look at each kind of literature in more detail.
Alright, so I hope you guys were able to understand the different types of literature. So we have novel, biography, play, and poem. Okay, so here we have the definition for each word here, and we're actually going to go one by one. So you guys remember when he talked about a novel, he said that it's a story, but it's not true. So what do we call stories that are not true? Fiction, right? So stories that are things that you don't see on Earth is usually called fiction, okay? Or a story that is simply not true is fiction. So it's a story, it isn't true, will be novel, okay? Then we have number two. Number two will be biography, and a biography is also a story, but it's a story of a person's life, okay? So it's called non-fiction, okay? So it's simply a story of a person's life, and it's non-fiction. So we'll have this right here as biography, okay? Then number three, we have play, okay? So a play is also a story, but it's made to life with actors in a theater. Kind of like a TV show, you guys, or a movie. You guys know when sometimes, actors, or not actors, producers and directors decide to bring a book to life through, for example, a TV show or a movie. This is really similar, but it's a play instead of shooting and stuff like that. So play, it's a story with actors in a theater. Okay? And then finally, we have number 4, poem. And it's something that often has words with similar sounds, okay? And it's about a certain subject. So for example, love or hate or anger or trust, or you guys get the idea. So, and it often has words with similar sounds, kind of like rapping. You guys know, any of you listen to rap music, a lot of the rappers like to rhyme, and this is kind of similar to it, but not really. Okay? So for example, say and play, hi and bye. You get the idea. Okay? Now let's move on here. Here we have our pronunciation check. Hearing the past tense to be. Okay, so this is actually important. We do not stress was and where. Okay, so you guys remember verb to be is and are, okay? And am. So, but we do not stress was and where. So past tense to be, because it's difficult to hear the words. So for example, when I say he was a poet, I don't focus on was. I don't say he was a poet. I say he was a poet. Okay, just scroll through with it. Okay, his poems were very famous. I don't say his poems were very famous. The word, it's difficult anyways to hear the word. Just pass through it. Just his poems were very famous. Okay, you can always rewind the video again and practice your pronunciation, which is also what I always recommend you guys. Okay, so here we have, look at the sentences from the lecture. And what is the missing word in each case? Okay, so this is obviously, it's the past tense to be. So Dickens, as in Charles Dickens, dash, born in 1813. So this will, past tense, obviously, so was, I was about to write where. Dickens was born in 1813. And the reason I chose was, you guys, was because this is the name of a person. One person, okay? Don't mind the S, that's just his name. So Dickens is the name of a person. Was born in 1813. B, many of his novels dash about poor people. So many of his novels were about poor people. And why did I write were? Because novels are is a plural word, okay? So many of his novels were about poor people. Then finally we have C, Shakespeare dash a very good poet. And Shakespeare, name of one person, was a very good poet. And we read the pronunciation check. Now let's move on. Okay, so here we have, you're going to hear 4 more introductions. Okay, so we have 4 introductions here. Okay, and this is actually really important, you guys. I'm gonna pause it after each introduction, and you pause this video right here and talk to a classmate or start recording yourself or do something, okay? And that just start asking yourself or answering the questions that you would usually ask yourself in an introduction, okay? And then resume the video and let's see if you were correct or wrong.
132. Exercise J1. Listen. What is each lecture about?
Lecture 1. Afternoon, everyone. In today's lecture, I'm going to talk about the life of an author. His name was Thomas Hood. He was a poet. His poems were very famous in the 1800s. Perhaps you know his most famous poem. The title is I Remember, I Remember. Okay, Thomas Hood was born in 1799. Lecture 2.
Okay, so here we have the introduction for lecture 1. And now, I'm guessing you already paused the video. You had something to say about that in first introduction. Now let me say it. So, the lecturer was talking about the life of an author, the guy called Thomas Hood, or a guy called Thomas Hood, and he was a poet, right? Born on 1799. Okay, or born in 1799, and he was famous, or actually he has a lot of famous poems, and the one he's most known for is I remember, or it was something like that. You don't have to get it right the first try. Hell, for me personally, I don't even remember everything that the guy said, and it was only a couple seconds long. So take your time and practice, and you will get better with time. Okay, now let's listen to number 2.
Let's start today with a question. Who is the most famous novelist in English literature? The answer is Charles Dickens. He is famous all around the world, not just in England. And his most famous novel is called Oliver Twist. Today, we will talk about Charles Dickens and Oliver Twist. Charles Dickens was born in 1812.
Lecture 3.
Okay, lecture 2. Pause the video and then come back. Okay, so he wanted to start the lecture obviously with a question that's not really relevant, but it's how I remember it. So I'm trying to keep things fresh here. And he wanted to talk about the novelist Charles Dickens and how he was famous and has his most famous novel that reached a huge success, and it's Oliver Twist. Okay, so that's the name of the novel, and Charles Dickens was actually born in 1812. Okay, now let's move on to lecture number 3.
Each culture has famous authors. Authors write about their own culture. But people in many cultures love the plays of this man. He was English, but people watch his plays in Italy and Japan and Brazil. He wrote his plays 400 years ago, but they are still very popular. His name was William Shakespeare, and his most popular play? Probably Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet at the end of the 16th century.
Lecture 4.
Okay, so lecture number 3. Now, the lecturer is talking about an author, someone that we know very deeply. Everybody knows this guy. So we're talking about William Shakespeare, right? And we're talking about how authors write about their cultures, but people really enjoy the writings and plays of this certain author. Okay, so William Shakespeare and his most famous novel, novel, and how Romeo and Juliet, by the way, name of the novel, spoiler alert, has touched a lot of places and people, okay, with its success. Right? Now let's move on.
Okay, so far we have looked at novels and poems and plays. There is one more kind of literature. It is very popular nowadays. Biography. Today, we're going to look at the most famous biography in English literature. It is called The Life of Dr. Johnson. The author was James Boswell. Boswell was a great friend of Dr. Johnson.
Okay, so the last piece of information that the lecturer was going to talk about, or talked about, was a biography. And you guys remember we talked about a biography. Actually, I'm going off topic here for a second. Is when a story is about someone, a certain someone, and it's true. Okay, so it's non-fiction. Okay, and that certain someone was, I think, someone who was called Dr. Johnson, something Johnson. Okay, and I don't even remember the guy who the author of the biography. So let me rewind that back, guys. It's okay if you don't get it the first try. It's just better to practice it and get better over time, okay?
Boswell was a great friend of Dr. Johnson. To look at the most famous biography in English literature. It is called The Life of Dr. Johnson.
Okay, so the biography is called The Life of Dr. Johnson, okay?
Author was James Boswell.
Okay, and the name of the author was James Boswell, okay? Simple enough, easy stuff. Now let's move on to listening. Alright, you guys, now moving on to lesson 2 of this unit. We have speaking, and it seems that we have kind of a similar tone to the listening section. We have a few pictures here, obviously related to literature and art, okay? And I'm guessing he's going to ask us, oh, here we go. So look at the pictures above, and how many pieces of art are there, obviously, and then we have how many pieces of literature are there. Okay, so here, let's actually go over them one by one, since now I'm guessing after that first listening section, you kind of have a clue or an idea to what art is and what literature is, and you can differentiate between the two. Okay? So what is number one? That's correct. Number one is a painting. Okay, and it's a landscape painting. Okay, you guys remember landscape paintings, seascape paintings. Okay, so a landscape painting is usually a painting that has land and is more focused on the land. It can have people, but the main focus on these types of paintings is obviously the land, hence the name landscape. Okay, so number one will be painting. And here we have number two. Number two will actually be a painting as well, an architecture. Okay, so a painting. Then we have number three. Number three will be literature, and I'm not too sure. Oh, it looks like this is a play right here. Yeah, this looks like a play. So number three will be a play. Then we have number four. Number four is obviously a novel, you guys. Looks really simple. A novel. And then we have number five. Number five is literature also. This is a poem. Then we have six, something about, I'm guessing this is a biography. So biography, number six. This is also literature. Then we have seven. Okay, so seven will be, yeah, this is art, easily. Yeah, I don't even know. I had a brain freeze right there. So this is obviously painting. And which kind of painting is that, you guys? You guys know? You guys remember the Mona Lisa? We talked about it. It's called the portrait. Okay, so a portrait painting. So, and then we have number 8 here. This is what I was talking about, a seascape painting. Similar to a landscape, you guys remember this, but it's more focused on the sea. Okay, so seascape will be number 8, and number 8 is obviously art. Okay, then we have number 9. 9 is also art, but it's called painting as an abstract art. Okay, so it's also kind of art or painting called abstract art. And finally, Vincent van Gogh. Wow. We have 10 is just simply still life. Okay, name of the painting, obviously. And this will also be art. All right. So now let's move on here. Okay, you're going to hear a talk about a famous author. Okay, and this, oh wow, this is Naguib Mahfouz, someone Egyptian as well, just like me. So let's actually listen, and we're going to be completing the notes about Naguib Mahfouz. Here we go.
135. Exercise C. Listen. Complete the notes.
Okay, today I want to tell you about Naguib Mahfouz. He is the most famous author in my culture. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1988. He was an Egyptian. Mahfouz was born in about 1911. He lived in Cairo all his life. He went to Cairo University in 1929. He left in 1934. He wanted to be a writer. He worked for a newspaper for many years. Then he started work for the government. He married in 1954. He had 2 daughters. He wrote novels and short stories. He wrote about life in Egypt. I think his best book was The Children of Gebelawi. I really like that novel. He died in 2006. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, some pretty cool information about Naguib Mahfouz. So now we're gonna write some notes down, and we know that he was a novelist, so he was famous for, we'll write down novels and short stories. Okay, novels and short stories, and we could also say won Nobel Prize, okay, of 1988 or in 1988, okay, and full stop. And his nationality, obviously Egyptian, okay, Egyptian. And his home, she said that he lived in Cairo his whole life. And when was he born? I think she said 1911. Okay. And his education, I think he studied in Cairo University from 1929 to 1934. So Cairo, yeah, oh, let me write that in capital, University, and we'll just write 1929, yep, to 1934. Then we have job. I think he worked at a newspaper before actually becoming a novelist, so we'll just write newspaper. Okay. And then we have family. Yep, he did get married in 1954. So married 1954. And we could also add he had 2 daughters as well. Okay. And then we have titles, and I think she said her favorite book was The Children of Jibalawi. That was the title of the book. Children of Jibalawi. Okay? And finally, he died in 2006. Okay, you guys? So, his name was Naguib Mahfouz. He was famous for novels and short stories, won Nobel Prize, 1988, nationality, Egyptian, home, Cairo, born in 1911. His education was in Cairo University from 1929 to 1934. His job, he worked in a newspaper company. Family, he got married in 1954 and had 2 daughters. Titles, her favorite book based on the girl in the audio was The Children of Jibalawi. And finally, he died in 2006. Okay? Let's move on. Okay? So here we have, you're going to hear actually, hold on, let me check the skills check. Okay? So talking about the past, you guys, okay? So we have 2 past forms for our verbs, okay? So we have the standard, add an ed or d, right? And then we have some irregular verbs that use kind of a special form for the past tense. So let me give you an example for regular verbs. So for example, I could say live, lived. I just add a d, and that's it. Now it's past. Work, worked. Play, played. Okay? Stop, stopped. Okay? Simple as that. Now, with irregular verbs, a little bit different, and you're going to have to memorize these as you go. Write, I don't say righted, I say wrote. Okay? I changed that I into O. Wrote, as in past tense. When, won. I don't say wind. That's wrong. That's something else entirely. I say won. Okay? So, here, for your first example, for the first regular verbs, she lived in Varmland. Okay? He worked for the government. And for irregular verbs, we could say she wrote novels. He won the Nobel Prize in 1988. Now, we're going to listen to some regular verbs, and the first try, you guys, me and you, we're going to go at it, okay? And after we hear the regular verb, okay, we are going to say it together, the past tense, okay? Here we go.
136. Exercise D2. Listen to some regular verbs. Say the past tense form.
Live,
Lived,
lived. Work,
worked,
worked. Start,
started,
started. Want,
wanted,
wanted. Die,
died,
died. Study,
studied,
studied. Marry,
married.
married.
Okay, simple enough. Now we're going to do the exact same thing, but using irregular verbs. This might be different for you guys the first time, so try your best to, say whatever you know, and take notes on the ones that you don't know, new words.
137. Exercise D3. Listen to some irregular verbs. Say the past tense form.
Write,
Wrote.
wrote. Win,
Won.
won. Be,
Was.
was, were. Have,
Where. Had.
had. Go,
Went.
went. Leave,
Left.
left. Come,
Came.
came.
Okay, simple enough, you guys. And actually, I wanted to talk just for a teeny tiny second. Here, the word left means as in someone went somewhere. He's not here anymore. You guys remember when I talked to you guys in the previous unit about how certain words can have different meanings? Well, this is the case here. So when I say he left, I'm not talking about left or right. I'm talking about someone that's not currently in the room. He went somewhere. So he left to go to the bathroom. He left 2 minutes ago. He left 16 minutes ago. Okay? So left here means to simply go, as in the past tense of leave, like you guys heard. Okay? Now oh, here we go. Here we have skills check 2, giving a talk number 3. I hope you're keeping track of our giving the talks because they get better and better each time. So we usually talk about a person's life in this order. Okay, so when you're gonna talk about a person's life, like the lovely girl in the audio above, this is how you usually start. So you start with the name of the person that you're gonna talk about. So in this case, she was talking about Naguib Mahfouz. Okay, and then you give a brief introduction. So in an introduction can include nationality, hometown, the author or whoever you're talking about, what he's famous for. Obviously, this is really important. And you can talk a bit about, children or marital status. Okay, and then you start his life events, but make sure this is in order. So don't say, for example, he married and this and that, or he died in this, and then you say he was born and he studied that. No, keep it in order, okay? So he was born and dash dash, keep it going, and then he studied that, same thing. He married, give some information about that. He died, and finally just end it with he died and boom, okay? So this is how it's usually gonna go. And now you can give a talk about the most famous author or artist in your culture, and prepare a talk using this method right here, and check it with your classmates and a teacher, right? Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Alright, you guys, now moving on to lesson 3, vocabulary and pronunciation. Let's hop right in. So we have exercise A. Look at the adjectives in the box, okay? And then we're gonna mark them each with positive or negative. And here, when I'm talking about positive or negative, I'm not talking about mathematics, you guys. I'm talking about something as in good or bad, positive and negative, okay? So think of it as yes or no, good or bad, okay? And actually, before we start, I'd like for you to listen to the words, just for pronunciation purposes. So let me just play this audio for you guys real quick.
1. Pronunciation. Exercise A2. Listen to the syllables.
Beautiful, ugly, nice, horrible, modern, okay, interesting, boring, dark, pretty, realistic, great, childish.
Alright, now let's go to the words here. Here we have beautiful, number 1. And obviously this is a positive, you guys. So beautiful is always a positive. Oops, let me write it like so. So beautiful will be a positive. Ugly, exact opposite. Okay, so let me give it that sign, or that's an underscore. So ugly will be negative. Nice, obviously positive. And then we have horrible. When I tell someone you're a horrible person, that's a negative trait, obviously. So we'll add that minus. Then we have modern. Modern is probably, yeah, it's a positive. Yeah, something that's modern. So that's a positive. Okay. Okay seems kind of a more neutral, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of in the middle, but I'll just count it as a positive, more of a neutral position. Anyway, we have interesting. When something's interesting, it's usually positive. Then boring, obviously a negative. Oh, dark. Well, I mean, this is so subjective to people sometimes, so we'll just write it as normal negative. Then pretty, when I say to someone, you're pretty, I'm usually positive, okay? Not meaning it in a negative way. So pretty. Then we have realistic. Realistic is probably a positive trait, I guess. And then we could say great. Great is obviously a positive. Great. Oh, realistic is not a negative trait. I did not notice that. And then we have pretty, or right here. This was also mistakenly written as negative. Then great, obviously a positive. And finally, childish. So when I'm talking about childish, I'm probably referring to someone that should not be childish. So I'll write this down as a negative. So beautiful, positive. Ugly, negative. Nice, positive. Horrible, negative. Okay, beautiful is also positive right here. I really like this word. Modern, positive. Okay. More of a neutral / positive. Interesting, positive. Boring, negative. Dark, negative. Pretty, positive. Realistic, positive. Great, positive. And childish, this one's kind of a mind guessing one, but I'll just write it as negative. Okay, now let's move on. Here we have, what do you think of each painting? Okay, so you can always pause the video and give you should use the adjectives in the box to express how you feel about each one. So for me personally, honest opinions about this, it's ugly. Okay, so this painting right here for me is ugly, so that's obviously negative. Okay, now let's go to the second one. I'm not too sure how I feel about this, honestly. I'd say it's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting painting right here. So yeah, I'll use that adjective. And finally, this last one right here. Actually, I really like this. It's pretty specific and cool. So I'd use the word either great or beautiful. Okay, so it's great or it's beautiful. Okay, now let's move on to excuse me. Exercise B, read the conversations. Okay, so here we have, I think we have 2 conversations. Yes, we do. Okay, and then here we're going to choose the best way to complete each one, and then we're going to check our answers through an audio. Okay, so let's go with conversation 1 first. Do you like these / this painting? Okay, so we're talking about one painting, you guys. Okay, that's why I'm going to use this. The reason for that is because these, I should add an S here in order to use these. So if I say these paintings, now it's correct, but it's one painting, so this. Okay? B, yes I do. It's or they very beautiful. Obviously, like I said, they for multiple and it's for singular. So it's very beautiful. Do you like the colors? Yes, I love them. I don't say they, the objects. Okay, I love them. A, me. I don't say me, I. Don't ever say me, I. Say me too. So, or me too. Okay, so never me, I. Me too. Now let's go to conversation 2. What do you think of these / this abstract paintings? Okay, so now this was exactly what I was talking about. Now paintings are in plural, so I'm going to use the word these. What do you think of these abstract paintings? I don't like them / it, their / it's horrible. So I don't like them because paintings, multiple. Their, or I could say it's horrible if it was one painting, but it's basically the exact opposite. So they are horrible. Who's the artist? I don't know. Maybe Picasso? What about you? Do you like them / they? I'd say, do you like them? Okay? Their / them, okay. So they are okay. There are some interesting shapes, or they are some interesting shapes. Obviously, there are interesting shapes inside or in the painting itself. Okay, now let's choose, or actually let's give a listen to this conversation right here and check our answers.
139. Exercise B2. Listen and check your answers.
Conversation 1.
Do you like this painting?
Yes, I do. It's very beautiful.
Do you like the colours?
Yes, I love them.
Me too.
Conversation 2.
What do you think of these abstract paintings?
I don't like them. They're horrible.
Who's the artist?
I don't know. Maybe Picasso? What about you? Do you like them?
They're okay. There are some interesting shapes.
Okay, some simple stuff right there. Now let's move on down here. What do we have here? Oh, here we have the pronunciation check and saying do you. And obviously you guys know when I use the words do and you, we're probably asking a question. Okay, so let's actually open this. Can I open this? Let me actually just do this first. So usually, by the way, the you is not stressed. Okay, so I put the stress on kind of the end. Okay, so do you like this painting? I don't say do you like this painting. I say do you like this painting? Just go quick, you know what I mean? What do you think? You see how I passed it like a straight line, like a bullet. What do you think of these abstract paintings? You see how that kind of stress goes over think, abstract, and paintings, but not over do you. So what do you think of these abstract paintings? That's how it's supposed to be done. We don't say what do you think of these abstract paintings? No, we say what do you think of these abstract paintings? I hope you're kind of able to understand what I'm trying to say here. And we're gonna listen to some questions, and I want you guys to kind of pause it and repeat the questions after the guy or girl in the audio, okay?
140. Pronunciation check. Listen and repeat the questions.
Do you like this painting? Do you like poetry? Do you like landscape paintings? Do you live in a big city? Do you go to work by car? Do you live with your parents? Do you study English? Do you have an iPod? What do you think of these paintings? Where do you live? Where do you study? How do you get to college?
Alright, some pretty simple stuff. Now let's move on here. Okay, now this is going to be fun. You're going to hear a talk about a famous person. Okay, so we're going to hear a talk about someone famous. Okay, and I'm guessing this is just a simple true or false. Okay, so here we have some information about said person. Okay, and we're going to know if the information here, we're going to have to tell if it's true or false. Okay, let me play it for you guys the first time.
141. Exercise C. Listen. Mark each sentence true or false.
I am going to talk to you about a very famous person in my culture. I like his work very much. His name was Antonio Gaudí. Well, actually, his name was Cornet, but people called him Gaudí. Gaudí was a Spanish architect. He was born in Reus in 1852. It is a town in northeast Spain. Gaudí's parents were coppersmiths. They made things from copper. Gaudí's father took him to Barcelona in 1868. He wanted to study architecture. He went to architecture college from 1873 to 1877. After college, he became an architect. Gaudí's ideas came from the sea and nature. His buildings were not square, and they did not have many straight lines. He used circles and different shapes. At first, most people hated his work. It was very different from the architecture of the time. Later, people started to like it. In 1884, he started work on a church, the Sagrada Familia. He worked for 43 years on the church. He didn't finish it. Gaudi designed a lot of beautiful buildings in Barcelona, but he didn't make much money. He was poor all his life. He did not marry. Gaudi lived alone in his church for the last years of his life. A tram hit him in a Barcelona street in 1926. He died 3 days later.
Alright, pretty interesting story of Cornet Gaudi. Now, let's talk a bit about the information here, okay? And I'll play it one more time right after we're done, just, for the purposes of not really just trying to grab as much information as possible, okay? So, his name was Cornet. Obviously, this one is true. His name was Cornet. Gaudi's parents were painters, and from what I recall, they were not. They actually made things from copper, so we'll write down false. Okay. He was Spanish. Yep, that is true. He was Spanish. Okay. Gaudi's hometown was Barcelona, and I don't think that's the case. It was Rus, right? So F over here. Oh, it's supposed to be in capital. Here we go. He was a painter. And no, he was not. He was an architect. So F. He studied for 4 years. I think it was, I'm not too sure, but I have this written down. It was from something along the lines of 1873 to 1877. So this will be true. Okay, and here we have Gaudi's buildings were popular immediately. And actually, that's not true. I think she says many people hated them at first because it was different of the building styles at the time. So F. H. Gaudi didn't finish the Sagrada Familia. Okay, and this is true, but he did work on it for about 43 years or something like that. So I. He made a lot of money from his work, and that is not true at all. He was poor all his life. I even remember that one. And finally, Gaudi's wife was French. Not true. He never got married. That's actually sad. Okay. And final one, he died at home. And that's not true. He died, a tram hit him. Pretty sure you guys remember that as well. Okay, so now I have kind of an interesting exercise for you guys. So I'm going to play the audio again, and this time I want you guys to kind of add some information regarding if it's true or false. So for example, let's say right here, okay, so Gaudi's hometown was Barcelona. If it's false, then why is it false? What's the correct sentence or answer? That's what I'm trying to say, okay? So you could say Gaudi's hometown was Rus and not Barcelona, okay? Something like that. Okay, let me play it one more time.
141. False.
Culture. I am going to talk to you about a very famous person in my culture. I like his work very much. His name was Antonio Gaudi. Well, actually, his name was Cornet, but people called him Gaudi. Gaudi was a Spanish architect. He was born in Rus in 1852. It is a town in northeast Spain. Gaudi's parents were coppersmiths. They made things from copper. Gaudi's father took him to Barcelona in 1868. He wanted to study architecture. He went to architecture college from 1873 to 1877. After college, he became an architect. Gaudi's ideas came from the sea and nature. His buildings were not square, and they did not have many straight lines. He used circles and different shapes. At first, most people hated his work. It was very different from the architecture of the time. Later, people started to like it. In 1884, he started work on a church, the Sagrada Familia. He worked for 43 years on the church. He didn't finish it. Gaudi designed a lot of beautiful buildings in Barcelona, but he didn't make much money. He was poor all his life. He did not marry. Gaudi lived alone in his church for the last years of his life. A tram hit him in a Barcelona street in 1926. He died 3 days later.
Alright, I hope you're able to find the missing information here. Now let's move on. here we have skills check 1, possessives with S, okay? So we can make a possessive phrase with name, a name plus apostrophe S. So for example, if I'm talking about, Gaudi's parents, okay, or the parents of Gaudi, I can say it like this: Gaudi's parents, Jason's parents, okay, William's parents, okay? I can use that apostrophe as, something or someone that belongs to a special someone else, okay? Or we could also make a possessive phrase with a people word, okay? So not just a name, but a people word plus an apostrophe S. So for example, the work of the novelist equals the novelist's work, okay? If I'm talking about something that usually belongs to someone, I could say it this way, okay? So the work of the novelist's work, okay? Things of that. Let me actually I kind of froze there for a second. So let's actually hop right into the exercise, and I'll kind of explain it a little bit more as we go. So usually here there's kind of a difference between possessive and is, okay? So an apostrophe S can mean either possessive as something that belongs to someone or something, or is as an is, okay? But as an apostrophe. So now let's check it. So here we have John's a good writer, okay? So I don't say John, it's not a good writer doesn't belong to John, right? So John's a good writer as in is, or John is actually a good writer, okay? So good writer is not a thing that belongs to John, but rather a trait, okay? Or a skill. So John is a good writer. John's a good writer, okay? I hope you start to get it a little bit. Okay, now number 2. John's novels are very good. Okay, now this is what I'm talking about right here. So we have novels, and novels are probably things that belong to John, okay? So John's novels are very good. I don't say John is novels. So here it's not an is, it's possessive. So John's novels that belong to John, are very good. Number 3. I like Turner's paintings, okay? And Turner's here simply means possessive as well. Paintings that belong to Turner, okay? So I like Turner's paintings. Number 4. You can see Da Vinci's Mona Lisa in Paris, okay? So you can see Da Vinci's Mona Lisa in Paris. We're talking about the Mona Lisa that belongs to Da Vinci, okay? So you can see Da Vinci's Mona Lisa in Paris. So I'm not talking about an S here, you guys. I'm talking about something that belongs to Da Vinci, okay? Oliver Twist's a very popular novel, okay? And here, Oliver Twist, it's not a novel that belongs to Oliver Twist. You guys should know that. That's the name of the novel, okay? So Oliver Twist's a very popular novel, as in Oliver Twist is a very popular novel. So this is not possessive. This is just simply a simple S, okay? Or is, sorry, not S. Oliver Twist's a very popular novel. Now, let's move on. Here we have skills check 2, and here we're talking about object nouns and how we can replace them with object pronouns. You guys remember in the beginning of this book we talked a little bit about nouns and how we usually change nouns to pronouns so people don't get bored. Well, we can do the same but with object nouns. Let me see actually if I can zoom in for you guys here using the skills check 2. Oh, that's much better. So let's have some examples here. I like the painting, okay? Instead of saying I like the painting, I could say I liked it, okay? Or if you're going to mention the painting multiple times in a paragraph or when you're talking, you don't need to say the painting every single time. We talked about this, okay? So object nouns, nouns that are in the place of the object, we can change it to object pronouns. So pronouns that are in the object place. So I like the painting, I liked it. He saw the girl turns into he saw her, okay? And you guys got to know both of them are correct. It's just that saying the same noun over and over again in a paragraph or when talking can get repetitive really quickly, okay? And that's why we use pronouns. So he saw the girl, he saw her, okay? She knows the man, she knows him, okay? So the man, him. I hate war films. I could say I hate them, okay? Easy enough. Now, let's go to exercise F. I don't like novels. I don't read them. Okay, that's a really easy pronoun. 2. I saw Lady Gaga on television last night. I'm a big fan of Lady Gaga, personally. I saw Lady Gaga on television last night. I loved her. Okay, I'm talking about her multiple times, so I could say I loved Lady Gaga, but that would just be kind of weird, boring. So I just say I loved her. Tom Cruise, also a big fan, by the way. So Tom Cruise is a good actor. I really like him. That's something I would say personally. So I really like him, as in about Tom Cruise. Number 4, we were at the play on Friday too. Did you see dash there? Did you see us there? Okay? Did you see us there? Okay, you guys? Simple enough. Anything else? I think that's about it. Alright, you guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. Alright, you guys. Now moving on to lesson 4, reading. Let's hop right in. Here we have exercise A. We're going to read about a famous painter. I'm excited. So we're going to read about a famous painter, Claude Monet, and then he wants us to scan the first biography below. Okay, so I'm going to do exercise A. What I plan on doing is actually doing this first exercise here after or while reading the first biography, right? But instead of going, I'm going to read the second one as well, and this can count as very good practice for you guys to take notes, okay? Take notes and just genuinely try and listen and try and get as much information as possible. And then after that, we're going to answer these questions here and write, our own, just write our information that we took from our notes into these dates here. So 1850, 1860, and so on. And I think this avoids a lot of confusion, okay? So get a sticky note out because we're going to be reading for a while, okay? So here we have 2, find and circle all the dates. So as we go, we're going to be circling all the dates, okay? And we're also going to be underlining all the names that we see, okay? So if it's a name of a country, a place, a person, we're going to underline it all, okay? So here we go. Monet, Claude, birth 1840, death 1926, painter. So Monet and Claude, that's obviously a name, 1840, 1926, dates. Claude Monet was born in Paris, France, let me put that, in 1840, okay? 10 years later, Monet's family moved to Le Havre, okay? A small town on the northern coast of France. His father, Adolphe, started a shop, but Monet didn't want to work in it. He wanted to paint, okay? Monet went to school, but he didn't like it. He painted pictures of the teachers. People laughed at them. He sold some paintings at the age of 15. A year later, a painter called Eugene Boudin taught him about painting landscapes. In 1857, Monet's mother, let me actually just underline this, Louise, died. Monet went to the School of Fine Arts, a university in Paris, but he didn't like it and he left. He had to join the army, but he became very ill and left after 1 year. In 1862, Monet started work in a studio with the painter Renoir. He met a woman at the studio called Camille Doncieux. He married her and they had 2 children. From 1870 to 1871, there was a war between France and Prussia. Monet moved to London. He returned to France after the war and moved to a village near Paris. Camille died in 1879. Monet moved again to a town called Giverny. Monet died in 1926. He is buried in Giverny. Okay? Now, easy stuff, you guys. Now, let's move on to, I hope you're able to get some notes down. Okay? this had plenty of information. Now let's read the second one. Can I go? I think it's a bit blurry, right, like that. So let's just keep it like this. Claude Monet was a very famous French painter. He is called the father of Impressionism. Second biography. He was born on November 14th, 1840. His father had a shop. It sold supplies for ships and boats. Monet didn't want to work in it. He wanted to paint. In 1859, he went to university in Paris to study art. At 19, he joined the army and went to Algeria, a country in North Africa. He became ill and returned to France in 1860. Monet started work in a studio with Pierre-Auguste Renoir. He met Camille Doncier at the studio and they married in 1870. They had 2 children. The first boy was called Jean and the second boy was called Michael. After the Franco-Prussian War, Monet and Camille moved to Argenteuil. His wife died in 1879. In 1883, Monet moved again to a town about 40 miles from Paris. Monet married again in 1892. His second wife was called Alice Hosted. Monet liked to paint flowers, trees, rivers, and boats. He bought a boat and used it as a painting studio. He also liked to paint trains and architecture. Monet died on December 5th, 1926. Okay, a lot of valuable information in both those biographies. Now, actually here we didn't complete number 4, so why are some names in blue in the first biography? And I think the reason for that is simply that some of these words are hyperlinked to extra information. Okay? So, reading the first biography, make notes of the important events in Monet's life. Okay? And here we have exercise C. After covering the text, answer the questions below from your notes in the timeline. Okay, so take out your sticky notes now, folks. We're going to answer these questions here. Okay, so where did he move to in 1850? And he moved to Le Havre. That's correct. So he moved to Le Havre in 1850. 2. What was the name of his father? His father's name was actually, I think I have this, Adolphe. Okay? So the name of his father was Adolphe. When did he sell his first paintings? Give you a second. That's correct. He sold his first painting in 1855. What happened in 1857? What's that? Yep, that's correct. His mother, Louise, died. Okay? When did Monet join the army? 1858, that's correct. He joined the army in 1858. When did he start work with Renoir? In 1862, he started work with Renoir. That's correct. Number 7. When did he marry Camille Doncier? He met her and married, and I think they married at 1870. They married in 1870. Okay. Did he and his wife have any children? Yes, they did. They had 2, and let's actually name them. The first boy was called Jean, and the second boy was called Michael. Why did Monet move to London in 1870? And I think he moved to London because of the war between France and Prussia. Okay? And number 10, when did he return to France? He returned to France a year later in 1871. Number 11, when did his wife die? That's correct. She died in 1879. And she died of cancer, by the way. Just a little bit off topic, but I actually had some research done on this guy, and I know it. When did his wife die? She died in 1879. Where did he die? Okay, so notice they said where did he die and not when. So I think he died on Giverny, right? Because he moved there and he finally died there as well. Okay? Now, after reading the second biography, already did that, add extra information to the timeline on the right. Okay, so we're gonna start the timeline from scratch, you guys. Okay? So 1850 we're gonna write moved to Le Havre. Okay? And then we have 1860, and in 1860 he actually left the army. I'm using my notes as well, you guys, okay? So you guys should be able to pause this and answer it from your own notes. Okay? Then we have 1870. What happened then? He married Camille Doncier. Okay? 1880. And actually, what happens in 1880? I think it's something along the Camille died in 1879, and in 1883 he moved to Giverny. So we'll actually put a question mark on this one right here. Okay? So 1890. Do we have anything for 1890? I don't think so. So 1892, he married his new wife, which is Alice Hosted. Okay? And then we have the year 1900. We don't know anything about that. Okay, so nothing here regarding 1900. So question mark here. 1910, a question mark as well. And finally, 1920. We know that he died on December 5th, 1926. But there's nothing related to 1920 at all, so we'll probably just add a question mark here as well. Okay? So this is usually how you do it when you research a person's life, okay? So you make it a timeline of important events that happened in that person's life. In this case, we had 2 biographies, right? And you put a question mark on the missing information, kind of similar to a detective, you guys, when he starts a new case. You see a lot of question marks on his board. And why is that? It's simply because he's still trying to connect some things and connect, you know, obviously a thief or a killer, for example, to the scene and how things are connected to each other. Okay? So you try your best to add dates, okay, and obviously information related to the dates, and use a question mark whenever you don't know either the information or the date. Okay, you guys? Simple stuff. Now let's move on. Alright, you guys, now moving on to lesson 5, writing and grammar. Let's just hop right in. So exercise A, study the table of regular verbs. You guys remember this, regular and irregular verbs. We talked about regular verbs that use ed or d for their past tense, and irregular verbs that have a completely different words or a word for their past tense, okay? So write the past tense of each regular verb here. So try and say it before me, or write it down before I do, okay? So we have first word is live, and past tense will be lived, okay? Move will be moved, and you guys have to memorize these, okay? There's no way around it. You gotta understand the past tense for a regular verb and irregular verb, okay? Then we have return will be returned, die, died, okay? Marry will be married. I'll get rid of that y and add ied. Work, simple worked. And adding 2 more from my own will probably be, I'll use the word play, played, and I could say eat, or actually no, that's an irregular verb, okay? Not eat. I could probably say study, studied. Okay, simple stuff, you guys. Now let's move on. Here we have 2. This is what I'm talking about right here. This is the tough kind of. It's not really tough. It's just you gotta think about it. So write vowels in each word to make an irregular past tense verb. And what is the infinitive in each case? Okay, so what's the original word in present? And we also have to complete the word in past tense as well. So infinitive, obviously this is go, and this will be went, okay, with an e. See how different the words are? Same meaning, just different tenses. You see, whole different word. Okay, and then we have this is left, so this will be leave, okay? C will be become, and this is be came, okay? D, what is this? Met, so meet, okay? To meet someone new, not meet as in the one that you eat, just meeting someone. Okay, E will be sell, and sell in past tense is sold. Oh, sell, sold. Okay? F will be have, because the past tense of that is had. Okay? Then we have G, buy, bought, B-O-U-G-H-T. GH is silent, by the way, you guys. So bought, boat. I bought it. Okay? H will be write. Past tense of that will be wrote. Change the I to O. Okay? Easy peasy. Let's move on. Here we have complete the biography. Oh, give it a second. Complete the biography with the verbs in the box. Okay? Use the correct form, and you can use the same verb more than once. Okay? So actually, let me read the verbs first. So I'm gonna have to write these down. Okay, so be, become, continue, die, fall, go, have, leave, marry, meet, run, send, and write. Okay? And we can use a same verb or the same verb more than once. Okay? So that opens things up just a little bit. So Mary Godwin was born in 1797. Excuse me. Her mother, a famous writer, 10 days later, probably died. So died 10 years later. Or 10 days later, not 10 years later. Oh, in 1812, her father sent her to live in Scotland. Okay? She met the poet Percy Shelley. Okay? So she met the poet Percy Shelley there, and she fell in love with him. At 16, she ran away from home with Shelley. Okay, that's a good story right there. I already like this. Okay. He already had a wife. Okay, maybe not so good. Spoke too soon. He already had a wife, Harriet, but he, what was that? Well, we could say, but he left her for Mary. Okay, that's more like it. But he left her for Anne. And then we have Harriet. But he left her for Harriet. Died in 1816. And Mary probably married because she is cold-hearted. I'm just kidding, by the way. And Mary married. Okay, Mary here is the name. Okay, not as in Mary married. God, that sounds so weird. And Mary married Percy in the same year. Okay, Mary married Percy in the same year. She became Mary Shelley. That's what happens, by the way, when you get married. You inherit the last name of your husband. Don't get married. I'm just kidding. Okay? They went to live in Italy. What a cute story. So, Mary Shelley wrote a novel, Frankenstein, in about 1878, or Frankenstein, pronounced, both are correct, by the way. Don't mock me on it. In about 1817, it was probably the first science fiction story. Wow, you learn something new every day. I did not know that. It was a huge success. Percy Shelley drowned in 1822. Okay? Wow, I really like this. Mary Shelley, sorry. It was, Mary Shelley dashed to write novels. What can I say here? Could say continued, right? To write novels, short stories, and biographies for the rest of her life. She died in 1851. Okay, simple enough. So, was, died, sent, met, fell, ran, had, left, died, married, became, went. Wrote, was, and continued. Okay, simple stuff. Now, let's go to the skills check here. This is kind of what I wanted to talk about. Here we have noun phrases. And here we sometimes talk about the same person or thing in two ways in the same noun, okay? So kind of using the same noun we talk about the same person or thing in two different ways. Okay, so the noun phrase can be the subject or the object of the verb. Okay, so using the same noun phrase, we could talk about the same person or thing in two different ways. Okay, so for example, her mother, a famous writer, died. You see how that right there, talking about someone in two different ways. She's her mother, but she's also a famous writer. You notice how we use the commas right there? Because without a commas, this doesn't make sense at all. A comma is what makes this possible, okay? And we could use this as a subject or as a noun, okay? Or not a subject or noun, sorry, that was stupid. Subject or object. Here we have she met the poet Percy Shelley, okay? Now here, object, same way. The poet, so he's a poet, and Percy Shelley, okay? So the poet, okay, he's a poet, and his name's Percy Shelley, okay? Also, again, notice the use of commas, okay? And without commas, this would not make sense, okay? Now, let's read the skill. We already did that. Find examples of this pattern in the text. So let's actually open this up here, just to kind of, get it. So here we have, she met the poet Percy Shelley. We found one. Okay, her mother, a famous writer. This one as well. Anything else? He already had a wife, Harriet. You see this? Okay, so we found 3. Good enough. So he already had a wife, okay, Harriet. So she was a wife and her name was Harriet. Okay, you guys? Now let's move on here. So exercise E, look at table 1. What are the missing past tense verbs? Okay, so now we're gonna kind of shift our focus to the past tense verbs, as in was and were. So verb to be in the past tense, and here we add a noun and the verb to be plus the other. So what are the missing past tense verbs? And you guys gotta know, it's just simply like is and are. You use is when it's in singular, obviously in present, and are in plural. Same exact thing, but now it's in the past, okay? So I could say Naguib Mahfouz, verb, Egyptian. So Naguib Mahfouz was Egyptian. Why? Because Naguib Mahfouz is the name of one person, okay? However, when I say his novels, I can't say was about Egypt because novels is a plural word. So his novels were about Egypt. You guys get the idea? So Naguib Mahfouz was Egyptian. His novels were about Egypt. Now let's go to table 2 here, exercise F. Same exact thing, but kind of in the beginning now. So it used to be in the middle, but now the verb will be in the beginning. You get the idea once I start. So we have dash Monet French, as in it's a question, right? So I could also use verb to be in the past or in the present. Both work as a part of asking a question. So instead of making a statement like Naguib Mahfouz was Egyptian, if I want to ask about Monet's nationality, I could say, was Monet French? You see what I did there? So was Monet French? Okay? And I used was, you guys, because this Monet is one person, okay? Singular. However, his paintings, abstract art, it's also a question, so were his paintings abstract art? The reason I added were, that's correct, because paintings is a plural word. Okay? Now, let's answer these questions. So, was Monet French? I could answer by saying, yes, he was. Okay? Yes, he was. Okay? He, obviously, singular again, so was. You see how the different place for the verb doesn't really affect it? Like, if it's a question, if it's in the beginning, obviously, but it's mostly the same concept, just a different place, okay? So, were his paintings abstract art? No, they were. Or they were not, or they weren't. So, weren't. Oops. No, they weren't. Okay? So, yes, he was. No, they weren't. Okay? let's go to exercise G. Give it a second. Here we go. So now we're asking a question, but the question starts with a question word. So what, where, how, get the idea. And then he wants a verb to be, and then simple other. So other information. So what, now leave this for a second and read the rest of the information. Gaudi's real name. So with this, guys, we talked a little bit about the apostrophe S here. This means that it's possessive. This name belongs to Gaudi. Okay, so this is not a shortcut for S or is. Okay, this is simply a possessive, something that belongs to Gaudi, and in this case, it's his real name. So what? Obviously, Gaudi is one guy. Okay, so Gaudi is not plural here. I just explained that. So Gaudi was, or what was Gaudi's real name? Okay. And now another question, where dash Gaudi's parents from? So now this is also possessive, by the way. So parents, they belong to Gaudi's, okay? They're his parents. So this S is not is again, so this is possessive as well. And in this case, plural. We're talking about his parents, both of them. Okay, so not only one, but two. So where were Gaudi's parents from? Okay? And remember, guys, if I wanted to add a pronoun here, I know this is kind of a little bit off topic, but just for your information, I could say, where were his parents from? You see how I kind of switched from a noun to a pronoun? That's what I say when I tell you guys to try and use pronouns. So there's nothing wrong with using a noun. It's just that you can also use a pronoun, so you kind of have that flexibility to talk or write, you know, in a certain way. Okay? So where were Gaudi's parents from? Obviously, don't make the same mistake as some people. So we have two wheres here. One is a question word. Always remember this. The one that has H in it is a question word, and this is just a verb. Okay? Now let's move on. Oops. Exercise H. Give it a second. Here we go. So we have a noun or a pronoun. Okay, so now he starts the sentence with a noun or a pronoun. And then we'll add a verb. So not necessarily a verb to be. So not is, are, was, where, but a normal verb plus its past tense. So we'll either add d or ed. So the fact that he wants ed means that we're going to be using regular verbs, not irregular verbs. Okay. So let's check the first one out. Mahfouz dash in Cairo all his life. So I'm guessing he probably wants us to say that he lived in Cairo all his life. So this is the verb in present. Okay, live. Since we already have an E, we'll just add a D there, and look at that. Mahfouz lived, past tense, in Cairo all his life. Alright, now let's go with one more. Mahfouz dash for a newspaper for many years. So, based on what we listened to in the previous lessons, we know that Mahfouz worked for a newspaper for many years. Getting rid of that ed, this is work. Just a simple present tense verb. Okay? I add ed, now it's past tense. You see what I'm doing? Mahfouz worked for a newspaper for many years. Now, instead of a noun, he put a pronoun in the beginning of the sentence. So now, let's see what we can do. So he, as in obviously referring to Mahfouz, you guys, he dash about life in Egypt. So since we know that he loved writing, Naguib Mahfouz loved writing, we can simply assume that he wrote about life in Egypt. And now look at this. We used regular verbs here, but here we're using irregular verbs. So if I say write, this is present tense. Okay? This is a verb in present. But if I want to put it in past, I don't add a D. This is wrong. I don't say righted. Okay? It's even in red. So you say wrote. You get rid of that I and add an O. He wrote about life in Egypt. Now, number 2, he dash the Nobel Prize for literature. Okay? So obviously he won the Nobel Prize for literature. If I say win, this is present again. But you see, regular verbs, you have to switch it up. Okay? He wrote about life in Egypt and he won the Nobel Prize for literature. Simple enough. Now let's move to exercise I. Look at table 5. Give it a second. Okay, so prepositions. We talked about prepositions a lot in this course, you guys. I think you should have kind of a general idea of when to use in, on, at, from, between. You guys get the idea. Let's actually start with number 1. So this is just a simple date, 1895. So we're going to use in with that. Try to remember these and how to use them. And the more you actually start speaking and listening to people talk and start writing, the more it becomes second nature to you to use preposition or the correct prepositions in the right place. Okay, so it's just a matter of practice and simply getting used to which preposition comes before which word. Okay, and then we have the same year. So I don't say at the same year, that's wrong. We also say in. So in 1895, in the same year, okay, now we kind of added a month. So November 1895, month plus year is also still in. Okay, so we use in with 1895, we use in, talking about the same year, and we use in if we have a month plus a year. Now check this out. When I add kind of a specific day, 15th November 1895, I can say on. Okay, so on 15th November 1895. Think of it as this. On means as in on something, okay? So when I say it's on the table, okay, it's on the table, it's on top of the table, right? But when I say it's in the table, it's somehow miraculously in the table itself. You get what I mean? This is kind of the difference. Obviously, it can have different meanings, but this is as close as I can get to kind of giving a differentiation for you guys. Okay, so on the 15th, a very specific day, so it's on that day. Okay, on 15th November 1895. Now here we have the age of. Okay, so when I'm saying the age of and a number, simple age, I say at. So when I was at the age of 15, when I was at the age of 16, at 17, it's always, I don't say on the age of 15, I say at the age of 15. Okay? If I'm talking about reading a biography, for example, I say when he was at the age of 25, for example. Okay? At, and not in or on. And here we have dash 1870 to 1871. So when I'm comparing between from and to, this is what I use. I already said it. So from this year to this year, this is what we use. From and to. So from 1870 to 1871, you know, he was in the war, for example, or he joined the army. Okay? And I could also say between. So now between, it means that space between this year and this year. So between 1870 and 1871, 2 days, something happened, for example. So when using 2 days, dates, and years, we can use from and to, between, and. They kind of have a very similar meaning, by the way. Okay? And I think that's it, right? Alright, now let's move on. Alright, you guys, now let's move on to the next page. Same lesson, writing and grammar. Okay, so here we have some extracts from the texts, obviously from this unit. Okay, and he wants us to find and underline all the plural nouns. And I'm sure you guys know what nouns are, so let's just hop into reading. So the first one, Monet went to school, but he didn't like the school. He painted pictures of the teachers. People laughed at the pictures. Okay, so I can easily, what does he want? I think he wants underlining all the plural nouns. So can we, yep, we can underline the pictures. So we can say he painted pictures. This is a plural noun. Okay, what else can I see? I can see people. People is also a plural noun. Okay, doesn't necessarily need to have an S at the end, but you get the idea. People, plural. Laughed at the pictures again. Second one, A painter called Eugene Boudin taught Monet about painting landscapes. And I can see it right here. Landscapes is the only plural noun. And then we have Monet's father had a shop. The shop sold supplies for ships and boats. And I can clearly see supplies here. So the shop sold supplies, plural noun. For ships, also plural noun, and boats. Okay? Now let's move on. Here we have Monet liked to paint flowers, trees, rivers, and boats. Monet also liked to paint trains and architecture. So I can see that Monet liked to paint flowers, plural noun, trees, rivers, and boats. All of these are plural nouns. And he also liked to paint trains. Trains is a plural noun, architecture is not, okay? Mary Shelley was born in 1797. In 1812, her father sent Mary to live in Scotland. Mary met the poet Percy Shelley there, and Mary fell in love with Shelley. Okay, so looking through this, I don't really see a plural noun, to be honest with you. The Mary, I don't see a plural noun, so there are no plural nouns in this extract. Then let's move on. Mary continued to write novels, short stories, and biographies for the rest of her life. And again, Mary continued to write novels, plural noun, short stories, and biographies. All of these are plural nouns. Okay? Now, let's move on. Here we have to look at the extracts again. Let me actually open this up for you guys. Some of the sentences are strange because they do not have pronouns. And actually, before I do this, let's hop to skills check 2 here. So, using object pronouns. So we can use, or we use object pronouns after a verb, okay? So for example, I can say, instead of saying he didn't like the school, I can say he didn't like it, okay? You guys, I talked about this a lot, that when to use nouns and pronouns and how they're both correct, but just depending on your style of writing and how, you should implement your pronouns. So, number 2, he sent Mary to Scotland. Instead of saying that, I can say he sent her to Scotland. Nothing wrong with using the noun. It's just you can use the pronoun as well. She met Shelley in Scotland. She met him, as in Percy Shelley in Scotland. He liked to paint flowers. He liked to paint them. Okay? And we can also use object pronouns after a preposition. Okay? So different ways to implement object pronouns. So she fell in love with is the preposition here, and then we have him. I could have said Shelley, for example, but instead I said him. I wrote a letter to preposition her. I could have said Mary, but instead I said her. He got a call from them. Okay? Now let's go upwards to the extracts again. Now let's add some pronouns. So let's read that one more time. Monet went to school, but he didn't like the school. He painted pictures of the teachers. People laughed at the pictures. Okay, so we're actually gonna rewrite this, okay? So we can say Monet went to school, okay? Nothing wrong here. But he didn't like it, okay? Then we can say he painted pictures. I don't know why I froze there for a second. Of the teachers. Painted pictures of the teachers. And people laughed at him. Laughed at them. You see what I did there? I only changed one noun to pronoun. So this plural pronoun here, pictures, I changed it to them. So Monet went to school, but he didn't like it. He painted pictures of the teachers. People laughed at them. Them obviously referring to the pictures. Okay, now let's go to number 2. A painter called Eugene Boudin taught Monet about painting landscapes. Now, if I'm gonna write this, obviously these are extracts that are originally in the text, so when I'm reading the texts, using these pronouns, I already know what these pronouns are referring to, whether it's landscapes or a certain character or someone, okay? So I can say a painter, okay, called I'm not too sure how I'm going to write that. I'm just going to write it like this, Boudet, okay? So a painter called Eugene Boudet taught Monet about painting. Instead of saying landscapes, I can say them again, okay? So obviously landscapes are mentioned more than once in the text, so I can get rid of it and add the pronoun them, okay? As if mentioned before, obviously. So number 3, Monet's father had a shop. The shop sold supplies for ships and boats. So this one's actually really easy. So Monet's father had a shop, okay? And instead of saying the shop, I'm now gonna say it. Okay, you understand now why we use pronouns? Monet's father had a shop. Instead of saying the shop sold, I can just go straight to the point. It sold supplies for ships and boats. Okay? Easy stuff, you guys. Let me actually add a full stop here. Okay? Now let's go to number, which one are we in on? 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so number 4. Monet liked to paint flowers, trees, rivers, and boats. Monet also liked to paint trains and architecture. You guys should easily guess this one. This one's really easy. So let's hop right in. Monet Monet liked to paint flowers, trees, rivers, and boats. Okay, you guys, actually, let me get off topic for just a second here, just a quick second. So, how do you use commas? Okay, so if we're gonna talk about a lot of things in a good order, okay, so let me elaborate more. Let's say, for example, I'm going to the supermarket, right, and I have a list of the things that I'm gonna buy. I can say, for example, oil, comma, and then space. I can say rice, and then I can say bread, I can say bananas, you guys get the idea, right? Avocados, and so on. But I don't add a full stop towards the last thing that I'm gonna buy or do, okay? So for example, here we have flowers, trees, rivers, and then I'm hopping to the last one, I say and. I don't add another comma, okay? I just say and. No comma, no nothing. Just simple and just continue with the final one, okay? Now, moving back, Monet liked to paint flowers, trees, rivers, and boats. Then I say he, okay? He obviously referring to Monet. So he also liked to paint trains and architecture. Okay? Simple stuff, you guys. Now, let's go to the second last one here. Mary Shelley was born in 1797. In 1812, her father sent Mary to live in Scotland. Mary met the poet Percy Shelley there, and Mary fell in love with Shelley. Obviously, they're referring to Mary Shelley here. They're referring to her name after she was married to Percy Shelley, just to clear any confusion for you guys. So, I'm going to write this one again. Mary Shelley was born in 1797. Okay, full stop. I'll continue again. In 1812, her father sent, this time I'm going to say sent her and not Mary again. You see how pronouns make things a lot more interesting now? Instead of saying Mary, Mary, Mary 100 gazillion times, I can just say her. So Mary Shelley was born in 1797. In 1812, her father sent her to live in Scotland. Okay? And then I can say, instead of saying Mary again, I'm going to say she. She met the poet Percy. Can I say? Yeah, I can say Percy. Yeah. So she met the poet Percy Shelley there. Okay? And then comma. And am I gonna say? I can say now, instead of saying Mary, I'm gonna say she one more time. Okay? So she fell in love with Shelley. That was quite a handful. Okay? So now let's read that one more time. So Mary Shelley was born in 1797. In 1812, her father sent her to live in Scotland. She met the poet Percy Shelley there, and she fell in love with Shelley. Okay? Now, final one here. Mary continued to write novels, short stories, and biographies for the rest of her life. I can probably say, I think this one's about the same. Mary continued to write novels, short stories, and biographies for the rest of her life. So, I could say she, obviously referring to Mary, but I'm not too sure. I'd have to read the text. So for now, this is the exact same. Okay? Simple stuff, you guys. Now, let's move on here. Here we have, you guys know this, read the sentences and choosing the correct answer. Here we have number 1. Jane Austen was or were, okay, past tense verb to be, English. English as in British. Okay, so Jane Austen, because he's one person, was English. Okay. 2. She wrote or writes Pride and Prejudice in 1797. So wrote. The reason for that is because we're using past simple in sentences about past events. Okay, obviously this is a past event, so we use past simple, and in this case it's wrote. All right. Here we have number 3. The King of England liked it or them. And obviously it, because we're talking about one thing, you guys, okay? It's a use of object pronoun. Then we have number 4. Mary Godwin or Mary Godwin's father sent her to Scotland. And this is her original name, by the way, you guys, before she got married. So obviously we're talking about Mary Godwin's because this apostrophe S is possessive, right? Mary Godwin's father, aka her father, sent her to Scotland. Okay? 5. She met the poet Shelley there. You can't say was Shelley, okay? He was never anything but Shelley. So she met the poet Shelley, or he was not. We don't use was with a name, you guys. Not like this, okay? So she met the poet Shelley there. 6. 4 years after or later, she married him. And we're going to use later because it's a fixed phrase, okay? And the word later comes after a time period, right? So 4 years later, she married him. Okay? Here we have a simple study the timeline. I don't think I can write this. Well, that's unfortunate. So here we have notes about William Shakespeare. Okay? And we're gonna have to write a short biography about Shakespeare in 3 paragraphs. So he wants us to divide the notes into 3 different sections. Okay? So what I want from you is to divide these notes into 3 different sections. Kind of his early life, for example, when was he born, anything if he moved places and such. Okay? And then in the middle, or that second paragraph or second part of notes, we want to get a little bit more into his life and what he has done. And then finally, for the last couple notes, are basically just his life coming to an end. Okay? And yeah, I guess that's about it, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.